Hello world, this is TIAC Pulse, and here are the top stories from the past couple of weeks. A startup secures $100 million to challenge hyperscalers in AI infrastructure. AI adoption continues to fail when it isn't integrated into core workflows. AI-powered telecom chatbots are improving, but expectations remain misaligned. AI's growth is turning power availability into a critical constraint. Private equity is making multi-billion-dollar bets on AI data center infrastructure. AI data centers are still relying heavily on fossil fuels. Joining me today, we have Mr. Brian Hodel, who is a TIAC founder member and the principal software engineer at T-Mobile. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with our first story.
Railway has secured $100 million in funding to expand its AI-focused infrastructure platform. The company is positioning itself as a developer-friendly alternative to traditional hyperscale cloud providers, aiming to give teams more flexibility and control when deploying AI workloads. The move reflects growing frustration with cloud complexity, cost structures, and vendor lock-in as AI adoption accelerates.
So Brian, is this a credible challenge to hyperscalers, or is this just, a little pressure on the side? $100 million, not a small bit of change.
Yeah, well, it's all in the context of what you look at, right? $100 million in AI investments isn't small, but it isn't huge. I think right now there's the potential to invest in the right solution and make a lot of money and be very successful. So there's a lot of investors that are looking out there for something that's a little bit different than what everyone else is doing. So I think the potential of having immediate deployment, being able to do things where a lot of stuff's going, where you can vibe code and you immediately want to deploy it and test it and not have to wait minutes to see what happens. There's a huge amount of interest in that. Now, whether you can compete against the big players and scale and they won't just eat you up with infrastructure is really the question. And I think that if you have a product that's good enough, that you have a good chance, but it's going to be an uphill battle because they're also scaling to compete with each other. They have a lot more buying power in all of the things, utilities and land and all of the different the contracts, negotiations. So it's a challenge to go against that, but we've seen a lot of other competitors in the AI space pop up out of nowhere, and something that nobody expects to be successful suddenly is a major competitor. Scaling is, of course, the really challenging part of anything in IT. So we'll see where it goes.
Right, for sure. So why do you think demand is surfacing specifically now for alternatives?
I think the speed of doing vibe coding is really driving this a lot. Because you aren't having somebody that's sitting there coding for hours or days before they want to deploy something and test it and see what happens. With vibe coding, whether you like it or not, there's a lot of people that really just want to ask AI to build something and then see if it works. Right? And it's the shotgun approach to development. And whether you agree with that as an approach or not, the reality is it's growing very rapidly. It's very easy to hire vibe coders, and in that space, in the vibe coding, you need a very short deployment cycle because you're essentially just throwing things over the fence and seeing what happens. So I think that this has a lot of potential. If you can shorten that deployment time and spin up resources and do all of that very, very quickly, so that you're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs. I think there's potential in it for sure. I think it's gonna put a lot of pressure on the big names to speed up their processes, because they're going to want to retain those customers and those coders.
So Brian, I'm beginning to think, with all these alternatives popping up out of almost nowhere, out of thin air, is the market being pushed towards more specialized infrastructure because of AI?
Possibly. I think there's an interesting fight going on between distributed systems and centralized systems, and historically data centers, where you want to put them in these very very condensed places where you have all the resources. But there's becoming more of an argument to say, well, let's have a lot of little data centers all over the place. We can utilize cheaper power. We can move that compute power around and be competitive. So whether that's good or not, I don't know if that's really a successful model. You've seen some of the data centers that are going up. Most of them now are just massive, and the capabilities to run compute and to doing things like training really requires very low latency. So I think that there's a lot of potential for something to work. And I don't know that anyone has the right answer right now. You have a lot of legacy infrastructure, legacy methodologies that are being scaled up right now. But there's, technology takes a lot of twists and turns, and you can see something that nobody expected to be the answer suddenly comes out as the winner. And if somebody comes up and that happens, they can, it's a pretty good chance they'll be bought up by somebody else. But the investors in that company could be very successful if that's the right answer. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to fail and continuously fail, whether it's because it's the wrong answer or because it couldn't compete. But there are definitely going to be some turtles that beat the hare in the race.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a space we need to be on the lookout for. Let's move on to the next story.
New analysis suggests that many AI initiatives fail not because the technology doesn't work, but because it is deployed in isolation. Without IT-led integration into workflows, systems, and governance structures, AI tools struggle to move beyond pilot phases. The article highlights organizational ownership and process redesign as critical success factors.
So Brian, as you know, this is a topic that we often find ourselves coming back to at TIAC. I guess the question will be, why do organizations still treat AI as a side project?
I think that there's a lot of IT stuff that's considered a side project. One of the challenges with the AI is that there's a lot that's unknown. Right? If you go out and you're going to deploy an ERP, there's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of resources. There's consultants. There's a lot of guides, and you know what you're going to do for the most part. Right? You have a map in front of you. The problem with AI is that there's not really a good map. You look out at deployments of AI across large and small companies alike, you're going to find that they're all having the same kind of challenges. And specifically in the IT realm, I think one of the things that is really undervalued is the change management aspect. A lot of my background is in Lean Six Sigma, and so using data to drive change, but also getting input from those who do the jobs. These are key principles in change management and deploying lean methodologies through an organization. And I think where AI deployment is successful is where you can guide this sort of organic growth to the organization, bringing tools to to be available and supporting and nurturing that growth from the ground up. For an IT person to go to an accounting team and say, we're going to solve this problem for you because we think it's a problem that you have, it's probably not going to be very successful. If you go to an accounting team and you sit down and say, tell me about all the things that annoy you with your job. What are the things that you don't like about it? What are the things that you do over and over again that you just sort of space out? Right? Those things are really good for AI improvements. And typically there's a lot of opportunities, not just in accounting, but in all kinds of spaces. There's a lot of opportunities to solve problems with AI, but you don't really see those things unless you are in that role. So I think AI is really one of those areas where the people that are doing the job know the best places to apply the AI. The challenge with that is those people generally don't understand what AI is good at and the best way to deploy it. So it's a really interesting journey that sort of takes a variety of roles to go down that path. And I think supporting the change makers in your organization that are saying, how do we move forward and change and do things, and also not necessarily using AI because we want to use AI, but using AI because it's the right tool to solve the problem. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into this, but that's definitely one of the challenges with deploying AI is you can't push it on people. They're going to resist, and it's going to be, you're going to build things that shouldn't be built, right? So it's a journey.
So Brian, if we were to say that this is either a leadership failure or a failure in leadership, or this is a failure in the operating model, which would you say it is? And where do you think the misconceptions actually lie in operationalizing AI?
I think it kind of goes in multiple ways, right? Leadership is really pushing to do AI for the sake of doing AI. And operating models don't really support organic growth and ground up innovation. Right? Some models, some organizations have great business excellence teams that really champion the innovators in the organization and supply the tools and technologies and the training opportunities for those people to sort of grow and expand in the organization. And I think that works really well, but very few organizations do. And the ones that I've seen that do have that typically go through a restructure every couple of years, and they lose that. So it's a challenging thing to look at it as an investment. It's a journey through the through the change management tied with technology, and that's new ground for pretty much everyone, right? Historically, IT has just sort of pushed out changes, and an organization has to adopt it. Where I don't think that that's really successful anymore. So I think what you have right now is people that are looking to make change, right? And if you go at them and you look at it as a way of I'm here to help you solve problems, and they're open to solving problems, and you use the right tool, and not just because we have to use AI to get our metrics up, but because AI happens to be the right tool. Things like document processing and workflows. And there's a lot of things that you can do really well with AI. But there's also a lot of things that I've seen people use AI to solve problems that it has no business being involved, right? It's not an AI thing. So it's a balance of finding people that are open and willing to change, and IT and leadership that are interested in supporting the growth and development and failures, right? It's new and it's changing. Things are gonna go poorly, and you're gonna break things, and you're gonna find out that your chatbot was creating HR policies out of the blue and telling customers the wrong thing, right? But that's the nature of change and experimentation. And if you wait for everyone else to do it right and then follow them, I think you're going to fall behind. And if you create metrics for the sake of metrics, you're going to destroy any good momentum or interest from the people that would have solved those problems. The creative people don't like to just do things for the sake of doing things. They want to solve problems. They want to come at you and say, hey, look, let's do things better. And hopefully AI is the tool for that. In this case, right? You're trying to do AI. But if it's not, I think you should also be open to solving it in different ways.
Totally spot on. Let's move on to our next story, which is looking at AI in the customer care space.
Telecom operators are increasingly deploying AI-powered chatbots to manage customer service interactions. While newer models are more capable, many deployments still struggle with accuracy, escalation, and trust. The gap between technical capability and customer expectation remains a persistent challenge.
Right, so Brian, chatbots have been around for a while, but why is it coming across as, AI chatbots are like the most controversial uses of AI these days?
I think one of the risks of chatbots is that you are essentially creating a digital assistant that is there to help people, right? It's there to provide people with answers to things. And while you can build a chatbot pretty easily on a short, small set of data and knowledge base that you have, knowledge base articles or something that work well, that are well documented and curated. Once you start expanding that into a lot of unstructured data and a lot of competing data that conflicts with itself, you start getting a lot of problems. And most of the stuff with chatbots, the data integrity on the back end, that's the biggest problem, right? If you ask a chatbot a question and it has 3 different sources that say 3 different things, it's not necessarily going to say, hey, I don't know which one of these is correct. It's probably going to give you an answer that may or may not be true depending on where it looked. It may be an outdated policy. It may be confused because it's the HR policy is different for PTO accruals in California than it is the rest of the country. There's a lot of these little caveats that are in there, and testing chatbots is really challenging. You have the problem that everybody is going to ask a question in their own way, coming from how they view it. So some people will ask an agent that something like is DC-10 optimal tire pressure at 85 degrees Fahrenheit with 50% tread wear. Right? You're going to get a very specific question, and you're going to get a very good answer if you do that. Then you're going to get people that go in there and say, what's the tire pressure? And you're not going to get a good answer. The problem is that an agent very well may give you an answer to that. And hopefully you've built it to not give you an answer if it doesn't have enough information, but that's a real challenge. But testing those, building those, and making them where they're reliable, dependable, they're going to give you only the right answers every time. There's a lot of variables in there. So it's a great way to say, hey, look, we have this cool agent. We built this in a very short amount of time, and you can. The problem is when you scale that, you make it big, and you start having all these different people inject their different views of how to get information out of it. It becomes the Wild West.
So this isn't necessarily an issue with the maturity of the technology or the models, but rather the way we manage the expectations around the scale of what we're doing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's the models are great, and I think you've been able to build really great agents on models for year to whatever, a long time, and you'll be able to continue to build them, and they'll get better at reasoning. But that doesn't change the sort of underlying fundamentals that if your data isn't good and your prompts aren't good and the context isn't given, that you're not going to get good responses. So one of the things that I've really pushed is to get people to start using even basic things. Right? Use ChatGPT, use Copilot, use it on a daily basis, and challenge yourself to get responses that are really valuable to you. And if you scale it out in your organization and you get people to just be comfortable with how to interact with AI, you're going to get a lot better results out of the tools you build with AI, because people are thinking in the context of dealing with an agent, an AI agent, and it's different than having somebody that's standing in front of you, that sees the room that you're in, that sees what you're working on. I think there's a lot of opportunities for doing things better if people understand the restrictions of where we're at, and I think still where we'll be. There's things like Microsoft has proposed, things like watching everything you're doing on the computer, right? So that solves one of those big problems, is the context of an agent. If it sees that you're in a video editing software and you're asking a question around it, it sees the buttons, it sees the frames, it sees what your settings are, then it solves that sort of ambiguity that typically falls in current agents, where you have people that are asking questions and excluding context around that question that would give it the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I'm working on, where, that's really what it needs to know. But data integrity is always a problem, right? That's always going to be a problem. It's always been a problem, and it will continue to be a problem.
Well, as they say, garbage in, garbage out, right? The model is only going to be as good as what you give it to work with and how it's trained. Let's turn to infrastructure constraints.
A growing number of companies are now focused on solving power and space limitations for AI workloads. As demand for large-scale inference and training grows, access to energy and physical infrastructure is emerging as a key bottleneck.
So Brian, is power becoming as important or more important as compute itself?
Yeah, I think the environmental constraints, like cooling and power and space, are all big constraints. Power is a real challenge, because you essentially have this finite commodity of things that fluctuates constantly. Right, demands on a power grid change on a daily basis. You see, you have like things in California where you have brownouts and saying turn off your electronic appliances at certain times. So it's not really just a new thing with AI, but it's amplified drastically with AI, because the compute, the data centers, all of the processing takes a tremendous amount of power, and I don't see that is going to go down. I think things are getting more efficient. The problem is that things are scaling up so much faster that they're being more efficient, that you really need to be able to not only generate that power, but distribute that power, and be able to be flexible with that power. And you can't just say, okay, well, it's evening time, shut all the compute off. Right? That's not going to work. So there's a lot of challenges that are out there. You can't just plop a power station down in the middle of nowhere. It's not Sim City. But I think there's a lot of advancements. Things like nuclear power has come back and become really popular. Would have been great if we would have not stopped it for 20 years and let things kind of fall apart. But it seems like that's probably the most practical way to move through the challenges that we're having right now.
One of the earliest stories, Brian, we were talking about how these alternatives to hyperscalers are popping up everywhere. So I guess you would see us lagging behind in infrastructure planning in comparison to our AI ambitions.
Yeah, I think, we as a, globally, I think infrastructure in most places is lagging behind all the demands, especially with the increased demands of AI. That's unfortunately right on the heels of EV power generation and being able to charge your cars and all the other stuff. Like we're implementing a lot of stuff all at the same time that has tremendous power needs, and again, not just generation, but being able to distribute that through the network reliably and safely. So it's a real kind of chicken and egg thing of how do we do this, but we need this before we can do that, and so it's sort of grown in tandem.
Right. Let's now move on to a major infrastructure deal.
KKR has agreed to acquire ST Telemedia Global Data Centers for nearly $11 billion. The deal reflects surging demand for data center capacity, particularly driven by AI workloads across global markets.
So a lot of the stories today are centered around infrastructure and scale and things like that. Now we have a major acquisition in this space. Do you think this deal signals a new phase of consolidation around AI infra?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges with scaling in general, and I think that's one of the things that you have to look at is okay, well, we did this really well, but now how do we suddenly build and scale that and be competitive? It takes time to acquire zoning permits and build land or build buildings and get the power and infrastructure in place and hire the people to staff it. That all takes time and a lot of work and relationships, especially in certain countries, is a lot more politically driven than in others. So there's a lot of variables depending on where you're at. So certainly, if you do something and you have the money, buying somebody else's pre-built spaces, data centers, or infrastructure is a really good way to do things. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that do really well in selling what they've done. Maybe just build data centers, not even have a purpose for them, but hope that they'll be acquired. But yeah, that's the thing is, to be competitive is you've got to move very quickly, and you have to be diversified. There's a reason that data centers are distributed across numerous geographical areas and tied together on backbones of high-speed data and redundant power grids and all the things that are in there. You can't really just build everything in one place and say we're going to have everything dependent upon this, because it will fail, and you can't have these AI tools fail. They are critical infrastructure once they are built and integrated in tools and operations within an organization. You have customers going to your agent and it suddenly says, no, I can't be reached, I can't help you. That's a real big problem. So you need to be able to scale geographically and in magnitude as well. So you're going to see a lot of this big investments of people with money doing things like this, consolidating and moving into the sort of hyperscale competition. Yeah,
definitely need to hedge our bets on this one. Let's see how it goes. Right, and finally, the energy question, or rather sources of energy.
A recent report shows that approximately 75% of planned on-site power for data centers will rely on natural gas. Despite sustainability commitments, the urgency of AI deployment is driving continued dependence on fossil fuels.
So Brian, was this unavoidable, or is this a failure in strategy?
I think, I think it was. I think it was a failure in strategy. I personally think it was a failure in strategy. I've been following nuclear power for a very long time, and if you look into it and you follow it, it's where we're now coming. This year, last year, as people are coming to the realization that this is a good, clean power. We have a lot of technology to reuse the waste, and it's just very, very efficient. And a lot of the reasons that people moved away from it was purely political, and which is really unfortunate. So we lost that momentum that we had, and now we're seeing move back into that space, but it takes a long time to do that, right? It takes a long time to build the facilities. It takes a long time to implement storage and all the regulations and do things safely. So, not to mention undo all of the damage that was done from a communication standpoint. I guess people are still terrified of nuclear. Nobody wants a nuclear power plant in their backyard, although they're actually incredibly safe. So you go into that. But I think in another decade you'll see nuclear power plants opening up all over the place, and SMBs, the small mobile reactors that can be moved around. But in the interim, we know how to do things right now with fossil fuels, and there are cleaner ways to do things with fossil fuels. Natural gas is a great example because it's a byproduct of that. So why not use all of that, right? Why not use it as much as possible? And if you can do that in a way that say it eliminates the combustion aspect of that power generation with nuclear power, well, even better, right? So ideally, we would have stayed on course, and we would be more advanced and further along in our nuclear power journey. I mean, they had portable reactors in the Soviet Union, so it's not like it's a new concept. We just kind of stopped looking at all of it for a long time, to some extent. So I think we'll get there, and we'll have better sources in the future. But things like wind turbines, that's not scalable to power a nuclear or to power a data center. You can augment it, sure. You can add solar panels to the parking lots and the roofs and all these things to help. But you're not going to run a data center off of a solar panel. The space requirements are astronomical. Maybe someday, like before we were talking, maybe we'll have a much more efficient solar cells. But the reality is we are where we're at right now, and we need the power now. We can't wait a decade to see what happens. So I think fossil fuels is going to be a big dependence on that. And companies that can do it and do it within the current regulations. But also, if you have the capability to drop a power generation source in the middle of nowhere, or in the middle of a place that has space but not enough power, right? Or more likely than that even is a place that needs to have a backup that is very powerful. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. So you're going to see data centers that are powered most of the time with the infrastructure that's in place. But if at night or during a snowstorm or a heat wave, when they don't quite get covered with the current infrastructure, you can't just turn that data center off. So having modular power units, like the one in the article that they have, being able to drop in there, they probably aren't going to run 24/7. They will run to augment that need, and so the critical infrastructure doesn't go down, right? Heating and cooling and vehicle charging and stuff. Those are priority life safety systems. But you have the ability to switch on this backup system to keep your infrastructure running and your data center running reliably. I think that is going to be a really big industry for the next at least 5-10 years. That's going to be critical.
Right, so I mean, not every organization can just, I'm just going to deploy a portable nuclear reactor tomorrow to manage my data center. But what in your opinion, how should an organization balance the AI urgency question against the sustainability sort of goals that they might have? This is a tough one.
I don't think there's a good answer for that. I think a lot of people are on the look over here while and ignore what I do over there kind of a thing, right? They buy the carbon footprint to offset my private jet that I'm going through. It's a challenge to do that because on one hand, to be a company that's competitive, you're more than likely going to need to employ AI power to do things faster to be competitive. But at the same point, you want to be sustainable. They conflict, right? There's that. It's like the last discussion where you have the ideal way, right? This is what we'd like it to be, but the reality is this is where we're at right now, and I kind of feel like it's going to be fudgy numbers, a lot of that. So there's going to be a lot of the manage the perception and what we're doing in the data to say this is what we're doing, and we sort of obscure that idea behind a bunch of creative terms to make it sound better. But I mean, just the Super Bowl was just yesterday, and I think there were over 1,000 private jets that flew into the airport for that. So, it's already going on. I think that, in my opinion, it would be better if people were just more transparent about actually what was happening and not trying to sort of obscure the impact and hide the impact. If we're more upfront and honest about like this is a great tool, but let's use it responsibly because it's hurting something, right? However you do this, it's taking resources from something else. And if you're honest about that, I think maybe that people would be a little bit more careful on what they choose to throw AI at, right? Like you started off, a lot of solutions are using AI to solve things, and it's using massive compute. We really don't need that, right? We have workflows and automation and logic and tools that are in place that do things just perfectly for some of that stuff. AI certainly has its place, and it's making vast improvements, but use it responsibly.
I think as time progresses, this is going to become a more and more important sort of discussion to have. I'm just thinking of the long-term risks if this imbalance sort of persists. So, can't be good. Maybe we can ask AI for a solution. So that's a wrap. Like, subscribe, and follow this channel for more news from the Telecom Intelligent Automation Council. Good day.